So a survey is to investigate the characteristics, behaviors, or opinions of a group of people. Okay. In other words, we want to study a large array of people, a large number of people, but we are not able to study all of them. But we now look for a sample that will be representative of the number of people within that group. So when we begin to study the attributes of a few people representing the larger number of that people in that group, what we are doing is a study. It can be conducted in person. You can do it face to face. It can be done by telephone. It can be done through mail. It can also be done by internet. Okay, and of course, because we are saying that as much as possible, we shouldn't get in touch with people like I'm teaching now or the internet, and I'm asking for, can you hear me? And I'm still asking you at this point in time, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm calling over the internet to be able to survey the opinion of the larger number of people. But it was only one of you that responded, yes, sir. Okay? And that has made me to know that somebody can still hear me even as this lecture continues. And it can be used to ask questions about demographic information about characteristics like sex, religion, ethnicity, income, etc. In other words, I can ask, how much does your mommy give to you or your daddy give to you every month for, allowance? Now that you are buying so much data, I can conduct a survey so that when I ask about 30 of you in a class of 150, that means I've had about 1/5 of members of that class. If I can ask 30 of you and 30 of you that have cut across age, sex, religion, and when you give me such information, that will make me to know, like students that are studying Psych 101, whether from nursing, whether from physiotherapy, whether from nutrition, whether from psychology. I want to know. In fact, I can begin to now find out students from nursing, how much do their parents give them? Students taking Psych 101, students from psychology department, how much do their parents give them for data every month? And I can conduct a study to be able to know. And I can know for students that are studying nursing is that their parents are giving them much more money than students that are studying nutrition or psychology. And of course, we can now begin to find out more. What could be the reason why some of these parents of students from nursing are giving them more money than students from psychology? We are conducting a survey already. Okay. So it's a quantitative. It has qualitative and quantitative methods, but it has two characteristics. Number one, variables of interest are measured using self-reports. In other words, those who will respond to the questionnaire that are the ones that are responding. Okay. But again, by doing that, that will make us to know your thought, your feeling, your behavior, and considerable attention is paid to the issue of sampling. So, and that's why I said, whoever you are including in a survey, because since I said you cannot study every member of that community, the number that you're including must be sufficiently large to be sufficiently representative of the number of students in that class. So, for example, if in psychology we have 85 psychology students now, and we have in physiology, we have just about in physiotherapy, if we are just 30, I can't take 30 in psychology and take 30 in physiotherapy because I have not done good sampling. The number of people that I'm recruiting from each of the groups should be a percentage representation of the overall number of those that are in that subgroup, so that I factor them into knowing how many people I include into the research. In other words, the sampling that is getting people that are representative of the larger number of people. How do we do it scientifically? It's one issue that must be taken care of in survey. So, but in terms of the instrument we use, we can also talk about types of survey. So we can have questionnaire surveys, we can have interview surveys. In questionnaire-based survey, there will be something like maybe straight anxiety inventory that we want to give to people to be able to test their level of anxiety. So that's the questionnaire. It's already developed, it's validated. It's the same way your paracetamol is developed, the same way your other things are produced, the same way these test instruments also are produced. So instruments that are so produced, especially that are validated, they are called validated tests or validated questionnaires. But of course, you can also conduct survey by interviewing. Okay, I can just stop by, maybe where I know some of you say, maybe at the lunch in social sciences faculty, and I just bump into you, and I say, okay, are you a member of UI? They say yes. Are you from psychology? They say yes. Do you take Taekwondo? And they say yes. And they begin to say, give me an impression of the way that psychology teacher who teaches Taekwondo wants. Give me your own impression. I'm interviewing already. That's a technique of gathering information. So, but apart from classifying surveys based on the instrument used, we can also classify survey according to the span of time used to conduct the survey. How long? Like you can have cross-sectional surveys. You can also have longitudinal surveys. In cross-sectional surveys, you are conducting that study, but it's within a specific time. Okay? But you are studying many phenomena within that specific time. Maybe age, gender, you are factoring into what you are studying at that moment. But your study is at one. But you are doing a cross section. You are looking at parameters, age, sex, gender, socioeconomic status, on and on and on. So that's a cross-sectional survey. That is at one, but you are looking at various variables within that cluster of population that you are looking at. Okay, that's a cross-sectional survey. But in longitudinal survey, you are studying maybe a phenomenon, maybe a single phenomenon, but over a period of time. We can begin to look at students that were born and children that... You can't hear me? Who?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Is anybody able to hear me?
We can hear you, sir.
Yes,
It's
sir.
from their side. It's from their side.
So I don't know why I don't know why that student keep bumping into the flow of our class. If you cannot hear, that's your local problem. If 98% can hear us, let the class continue. Stop disturbing the class, please. Okay. So
can hear you, sir.
God bless you. God bless you. So we need to separate between cross-sectional surveys and longitudinal surveys. The one longitudinal does this for a long time. We are studying. Okay, I was trying to cite the example, like children born during COVID. I have some grandchildren that are in North America that have not been able to see a real church setting ever since they were born. Since last year that we left them over there. Maybe only once or twice have they left their apartment. And they have marked their birthday that day now. So this kind of children, they have not interacted in school setting, in church setting, in market setting, to see what's going on out there. So we may need to now begin to study such type of children, maybe over a 10, 20, 30, 50-year period, to see whether their behavior, whether their personality will be different from other students that were born in Beyeruka, in Popo Yemoja, in Mushin, in that wouldn't bother and has been mixing with other people during COVID. Are you with me? So when we begin to study these ones for the next 10, 20 years, what we are doing is a longitudinal survey. Okay. So now let's go to interviews. It's a conversation where questions are asked to elicit information. The interviewer is usually a professional or paid researcher, sometimes trained, who poses the questions to the interviewee in an alternating series of usually brief questions and answers. Of course, there could be other types of interviews. You could have what we call structured interview. When we say the questionnaire is structured, that means the questions are already written out, and possible answers or responses are also there. That's meant by a structured interview. That is, the structure is already laid out. It's already fixed. It's almost like talking about a quantitative measurement, because everything that you are doing and the responses that will go with each of the questions, they're already programmed. Okay, so let's go. Well, when we talk about unstructured interview, they do not use any set of questions. I can just get there and something just well up in my head, and I begin to ask questions about what's going on. So in other words, I did not rigidly plan what are the questions that I will ask. So if I have not rigidly planned what are the questions that I will ask, it's unlikely that I have an expectation of rigid answers that I will expect from those who are responding to my questions. So that's the difference between structured and unstructured. That leads me to types of research still. Now talking about whether it's experimental research or non-experimental research. When we say something experimental, in other words, you are conducting an experiment. And for anything in psychology, to be experimental, there are 3 characteristics that we're expecting. In other words, there are 3 features that must be seen when we are, conducting an experiment, not only in psychology, even in physiotherapy, even in nutrition, even in nursing. So for anything to be experimental research, number 1, there must be randomization. What do you mean by randomization? Randomization means every potential member of those who will participate in that research, they are being given free chance, equal chance of being selected into the pool. That's what I mean by randomization. And another thing is control of extraneous variables. That means all variables, all factors, all circumstances that can change your pace of research and what you want to test. You control it. Okay? Like I'm teaching now, I'm controlling extraneous variables by asking you to mute your microphone. Because when everybody keeps speaking back and forth, that can distract the teacher and it will not allow the teacher to do business with what he wants to teach. So, and that's control of extraneous variables. Another thing that a research must have is introduction of treatment or intervention. In other words, there must be something that you are manipulating for it to be researched. Okay? Like many of these COVID-19 vaccinations that you are seeing going on, they have been tested. It has been introduced into people to see what the response will be when we inject this AstraZeneca. How much effectiveness will it yield? We have seen that it's around 75%. But in some countries, it's about 65%. But in Nigeria, some people are saying 75%. Okay? So because we have injected you with, the dose of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine. So, and we will now use that to determine your body's capacity to produce immunity against the COVID virus. Okay? So that's introduction of treatment, intervention. But in psychology, psychologists may not give injections, but our interventions could be in form of talk therapy, psychotherapy, and many other things like that. That could be an intervention. So, but we can also talk about experimental research in terms of where they are conducted or the extent to which all these 3 major features of research, experimental research that they feature. So number 1, in laboratory experiments, those ones are conducted under very highly controlled conditions. But it may not be necessarily a laboratory in all instances, but you have accurate measurements as much as possible. The researcher decides where, who, when, how, and what hypothesis will be tested using a standardized procedure. For example, when you live here, you can read about Milgram's experiment. Milgram's experiment is an obedience experiment. So that's a laboratory experiment. But you can also have what we call a field experiment. A field experiment is not conducted inside the laboratory, but is done outside in the real world setting, and participants are exposed to different levels of an intervention. Okay, that's in field experiment. But in quasi experiment, you as the researcher, you have very little control over the independent variable, but you have the power over how the dependent variable is measured. We'll soon finish. You're almost there. And the next one I want to talk about is non-experimental research. In non-experimental research, there is little or no randomization. In other words, you have not sufficiently given people chance of being randomly selected into your experiment. And of course, the next thing will be no manipulation of independent variables. In other words, you are not giving a treatment in non-experimental research. And there could be very many examples. And you have cross-sectional, you have longitudinal, and you have other examples as you have here. I've explained what I mean by cross-sectional. You collect data for very many individuals at a single point in time, and you observe variables without influencing them. But in longitudinal, there's a long-term study of a cohort or a group of people born during a particular time or period that I have given you an example. The example could also be in other forms, but you are determining the natural history of a condition, and the effect of a situation on them. Okay, so the next thing you want to talk about is ex post facto. Ex post facto means after the fact research. For ex post facto, we cannot begin to look at those who have come down with COVID. So after they have come down with COVID, we now begin to check maybe their renal functioning, or we are checking, their anxiety level, their depression level. After they have recovered from COVID, that's ex post facto research. Okay? But again, you can also have what we call correlational research. In correlational research, you are checking whether an increase in variable will lead